Good morning. It's time for Monday morning reflections. Actually, I tried to record this earlier and the dogs decided to have a fight. So I'm going to try and do this live and hopefully the dogs won't fight. So today's topic is when it looks like nothing's happening or it feels like nothing's happening, whether that be our kids it looks like they're not doing anything, or they're not making the progress that we think they should be making, or whether in our own lives that we don't feel like we're making a lot of progress or being very productive even though we're busy. So one of the things that came up this weekend was I was marinating in books. You saw my book list last week and I read Risk Forward and I read Starve Like an Artist and I went through Connect with Courage. And so I'm reading, I'm pulling in information, not moving my projects along, but I felt like I was marinating in this thought process, in this mindset, in these sparks of ideas. And those were all coming part of who I was. You know that process of marinating a piece of meat? You know, you put meat in a bag and then you put in the sauce and then you set it in the refrigerator for a period of time. You know, sometimes it's 20 minutes, but you know, you run a really flavorful piece of meat, you put it in for like 24 hours, right? So what's happening in that period of time, some would say in that process of marinating, nothing's happening. But if you ever marinated meat, you know that that's not the case. That process of resting in the sauce and the juices infuses flavor, and then the acids work to tenderize the meat. And so in the end, you get this most beautifully flavored, tendered piece of meat, way better than it would have been if you hadn't marinated it. And you think about coffee, it's the same process. You know, you take your beans, you grind them up, you put in your water and set them either to percolate or to brew. And the hot water goes through and just infuses the flavor of the beans into the water, and you end up with this wonderful, rich, bitter drink that's caffeinated for your day, right? Tea is the same way. Tea bag into hot water, you let it just set and let it infuse and steep. So I was thinking about this, and these are action words. It looks like nothing's happening. Someone says set aside to do its thing, right? It's not, but there are actions happening in that process. You know, when we are processing data, and I'm a tech geek, so we talk about bandwidth and processing in our household in human terms, but we're connecting dots. So this weekend, I was marinating in this data, in these thoughts, and these ideas, and I'm literally in my head, neurologically, I am connecting the ideas and thoughts to other hooks of data that I've already stored. So connecting dots neurologically when we're creating memories is not a linear process. It is a very dynamic, three-dimensional process. It ends up with this net. Do you knit? Have you ever seen knitting? You know, it's a connection of dots, of knots. Think of that three-dimensionally. So you hook in here, you hook in there, or crocheting, you could do the same thing. And you end up with not a flat thing. You end up with this three-dimensional thing. And things don't go da-da-da-da-da. They go, oh, here, that connects to that. What about that? So this process that's happening inside of us, which is amazing, is this very, very dynamic, rich thing that happens. But we need time to really connect and to the past and present and think about future and how that applies. And some data, some ideas may sit back here and percolate and process and steep for a long, long period of time. If you think about your Instapot, if you have one, You know, with the Instapot, you put your ingredients in, right? And you put the lid on, set the little thingy, and you come down to the panel, right? And you hit your pressure button, and then you go over and you get the time right? So for chicken, you know, I'm gonna go and put it at 14. But what every new Instapot person ever learns the hard way sometimes is that time that you put in that Instapot is not the time it's going to take. Because first it has to get up to pressure, and then it cooks that time, and then it needs to come down off of pressure. So even though it may take 14 minutes for me to cook chicken, it's actually maybe 30 minutes or 45 minutes. That time period changes based on the ingredients that I'm putting in and how cold or warm they are. So if you cook like me, which is from the freezer into the pot, it's going to take much longer to get up to pressure. Takes much longer. So for some of us, where ideas are new to us or our brains need more development time to process, the time it takes to get to a point to show that we've learned it is different. It's just different. It's just, there's all these factors that come into play with it. And so sometimes it looks like our kids aren't doing anything. Sometimes it feels like we're not making progress. But in reality, there's all this stuff happening that we cannot see. We're steeping, percolating, coming up to pressure. And there goes the dogs again. Anyway, so I had more stories for you. If you've heard my cloud story, maybe I'll post that later. That's kind of an inspiration for this as well. Oh, the dog went away. Maybe I can tell you that quick. So the cloud story, this is something Esther taught me. She doesn't know if she taught me this. It's something she taught me years ago. And I looked out my office window to see her in the backyard. And she's just laying there in the grass, looking at the sky. And I'm like, and she just kept laying there and laying there and laying there. I'm like, okay. So I go out and I see what going on. So I come up and I'm like, what you doing? She's like, watching the clouds. I'm like, okay. I'm like, why are the clouds holding her attention for this long? So I laid down next to her. So there's the two of us. We're sitting here looking back at the sky. Oh, there's clouds there. And so then she starts, pointing things out to me. And Essie's she's a storyteller. And so what she was doing was she was watching the clouds and seeing the different formations, yes, in that observation time, that naturalist time. But what she was really doing was she was making up stories about the clouds. Things would look like something, and so she would name them and interact them with this, and she'd have this whole thing about that. To me, looking out my office window, it just looked like she was laying in the grass. But when I went out and I laid next to her and listened to her, she was rich in this deep, rich story mode. And it was really an awesome, wonderful lesson for me to realize that I need to pause and wait and listen and see, because there's so much more happening that I cannot see. Anyway, that's my thought, my reflection for the day, for the week. Anyway, I hope you have a really, really good week. And if you have a moment, pop over and send me a message and say hi. I'd love to hear from you.